Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today on Masechtas Zevachim daf Samech Vav. We are going to begin on Samech Vav Amud Aleph by the new parak. Let us now see the parak Chatas Of. Okay, so Chatas Of. So we know that the dinim of a Chatas Of is different than a Chatas. When it comes to a carbon Chatas, the dam is sprinkled above the Chatas Sikra. However, when it comes to the Chatas Of, the bird, it's done on the below it. And therefore, it's necessary to have all these things. There has to be Shasal Amata, that the blood had to have been placed below. It also has to be Kamasa Chatas, says Rashi, Malika B'Simen Echad, Vaza Umitzoi. It's necessary, when it comes to the Chatas Of, in which we said, as opposed to the Olas Of, the Chatas Of says Beferish V'lo Yavdil. You're not allowed to completely sever the head, and therefore you can only cut one siman. So therefore, that's what's necessary. And also you have to do the Hazah, as we said, in Mitzvah, the squeezing, at least of the body, if not the head, at least the body of the Of. And also has to be L'Shem Chatas, then Ksher. In other words, you cannot have a machshava other than it for the sake of a Chatas, as we've seen before, if it's Shlo L'Shma, it's possible. And then the Mishnah says, let's say, Kamasa Chatas, that you did, the Gemara is going to explain exactly what happened over here, what was the Shinoi, but your Maisa was that of a Chatas, but it was L'Shem Oila, but you had an intention Shlo L'Shma. So it has to be that, again, when you do the actions, even though maybe you did everything like a Chatas, but in your mind you're like, this is an Ola. Or for that matter, Kamasa Oila L'Shem Chatas, let's say a person did the actions of an Oila, and in other words, we'll see what exactly is the actions of an Ola as opposed to a Chatas. We know the opposite, it's the opposite placing of the Chatas Sikra above or below, but it was L'Shem Chatas. You did have the right intention that this is a Chatas, but your actions were not the proper actions for a Chatas. Or for that matter, if it's Kamasa Oila L'Shem Oila, so if not only was your actions also Shlo Shma, then obviously in that case it's Psula. Okay, Asalamala, let's say you did the Zrika on the top, so it's Kamasa Kulan Psula. So it says Rashi Kloimer, Kamasi Echad Mekulan Hamurim Kan Bil Kamasi Chatas Shem Chatas. It doesn't make any difference. Even if, let's say, you did everything else like a Chatas, and you did a L'Shem Chatas, but since you did the Zrika not in the right place, because it was supposed to be done below the Chatas Sikra, and did it up top, so then that will also make it puzzle. That's what it means. Fine. So again, let's go slow. That's what that. So we said okay. Now oil off. Now when it comes to oil off, is the opposite. So when it comes to a carbon oil, we know, which is kind of like counterintuitive, the carbon oil, the dam is put on the bottom, but the oil off is put on the top. So an oil off shiasal mala, it's supposed to be done, again, the zrikas above, and kamasa oila, you have to have all the other ola actions, and also l'shem oila kshera. So you have to have, it has to be l'shma. When it comes to an oil sa'of, you have to do the actions properly, you should have the right machshava, and then it's fine. Kamasa oila l'shem chatas. Let's say you did everything properly, but you had a shlo lishma machshava. So interestingly enough, kshera. So interestingly enough, when it comes to an oilas of, if you have a machshava for it to be l'shem chatas, right? Then it's not a problem. So let's read this again. Kamasa oil l'shem chatas kshera. Fine. Uvulvad shul also lebaleha kimaisi chatas. Shuloi also lebaleha. It shouldn't go to the owner. So the mitzias is, this is an ola. A chatas, obviously, is not just completely burnt. The chatas is consumed by the kohanim and the like, so it cannot be given to the Baal, even though it was in fact it was l'shem chatas. It doesn't make any difference because the metzias was an oila. So therefore, because of that, you can't give it to the Baal. Kamaisi chatas l'shem oila. Let's say you have do the actions of a chatas, but you have the proper machshava. Kamaisi chatas l'shem chatas psula. So we say in that situation it is possible. The fact that you had the wrong actions, even though it was lishma for the right carbon, it's going to be possible. It's the same thing as kamasi chatas l'shem chatas. It's just as bad, which, I mean, of course, this is even worse. If an ola that's masachatas l'shem chatas, it's psula. So the ikr is that it cannot be masachatas. If it's l'shem chatas, it's okay. Also lamata kamasikulam psula. So again, when it comes to the ola sa'of, the application is supposed to be done above the chata sikra, and therefore it was done below, then it will be psula. Okay, so that's the Mishnah, which we kind of got through, and now let's see the Gemara on this Samach Vav Amud Beis. So let's see the Gemara. Now, Deshani B'mai, exactly what was the difference? Says Rashi, Aka Maisa Oila. Let's say you did the action for the sake of an Ola, was L'Shem Chatas, but it was L'Shem Chatas. In Boile Eza Davar B'Chatas, what exactly is done by a Chatas that's also Kamaisa Oila, that is like an Oila? So, the Shani B'mai, Ilim, but the Shani B'malika, if you want to tell me regarding the Malika, namely that you were Mabdil, even though it's supposed to be by a Chatas Oaf, you're not supposed to be Mabdil, but nonetheless you did cut it. So, name of the Rabbi Rav Shimon. So this is not Rabbi Elazar Rav Shimon. The Yomer Shemaiti Shemabdilin B'Chatas Oaf. So he holds, as we saw before, exactly what does this mean, that you could taka break both simanim when it comes to the Chatas Oaf as well, and therefore obviously that wouldn't therefore be considered a deviation. Of course, the Ola Oaf you're supposed to be Mabdil. By the Chatas Oaf it says Lo Yavdil, but that's not necessarily what it means. Okay. V'lo ukimna to look Rabbi Elazar Rav Shimon. V'lo ukimna to look, and we don't want to establish to look Rabbi Elazar Rav Shimon loy deshani b'hazah. So instead, we're going to say the difference is with regard to the blood applications. So what is that? To the without mitzui, as Rashi says, shlo hiza ela mitzah, that you actually didn't sprinkle, but you squeezed it. Shamitzuhi avoda oila, because mitzah, the squeezing of the animal, is dafka by the oila, and therefore that was the difference. By the oila, you squeeze it, you do mitzui. By the chatas, you don't. So hachinami mistamrim in the tani seva also lamala, that if you did it up top, which is again what you're supposed to do for an ola sa'of. So we say it's kamasa kulan psula. So even though it's a chatas oaf, but the fact is that you did it above, it was supposed, which is the way that an olas oaf is done. So then that's psula. The afilu kamaisi chatas hashem chatas, fine, and so that's what we're going to say. It says Rashi hachinam asarbi dechol shinui the mastisin bazahu. That all has to do with sprinkling, and therefore that's what we see over here. That it immediately afterwards talks about the sprinkling. So therefore, the distinction is when it comes to mitzui. So that's one of the differences. So look at question 5. Elu be shinuyim. These are the two answers. Yesh bein avodas hadam sheba'oila sa'of v'avodas hadam sheba'chata sa'of. So this is one of them. The difference in hazah, or specifically in mitzui. This is question number 5. Okay. So again, let's see what he writes. So one difference is chata sa'of yesh ba hazah, you sprinkle it, umitzui. You do hazah and mitzui. But oil sa'of, ein bo hazah ela mitzui. So I may have said it a little bit differently. The oil said oif, all there is mitzui, right? By the oil sa'of, all there is dafka that. Shlo hiza ela mitzui. When it comes to the shemitzui hi avodas oila, only, right? Without hazah. Okay, so that's one difference. So again, the ola sa'of, just make sure we get this down. Ola sa'of is only we do the mitzui, which is a squeezing, but the chatas ha'of, we do mitzui and hazah. Okay, so that's the difference. That's difference number one. Okay, let's keep going. Let's get to the two dots. So he said that if, let's say, even if you did the maisa chatas or l'shem chatas, so again, whether or not you cut it or didn't cut it. So di'emar malika b'chol makom. So where where it was done, rather, there's the Emar Malika b'chol makom b'mizbeach ksher. It could be done anywhere. El lav, so that can't be. El lav deshani b'hazah. As we said, the difference was with its sprinkling. I'm going to say for b'hazah, reshanam b'hazah. So again, maybe it's a raya that just like from the seifa says b'shinoi lamala b'hazah. We're talking about that was sprinkled above or below, so too maybe the difference is also there, and not necessarily with mitzui. Says Rashi, Kol chada v'chad b'mada havishinu legabi mayri. Reisha de mayri b'shinu imaseha. The Reisha was talking about an action difference. Ikla meimer de b'malika nami ayri. Could be talking about malika. The seifa, which is Maisa, the malika loy havi shinoi titzoikim b'hazah. So this is the second answer that by chatas of we know is lamatim in a chut, right? And the oilus of is lamalim in a chut. Okay, so again, the oilus of is above the chut, right? So which is the top half. And the chatas of is on the bottom or below the chut, right? So those are two distinctions. Of course, again, a chatas and oil are the opposite. So, right, just in general, we know a chatas is above the chut, and an oila is below, right? And this is by oilus behema, right? Okay, so that's the answer for question 5. Okay, whether or not it's above or below, and then let's finish up this question. Umahadin imshina b'chatas v'yasa ka'oila. What's the difference if you did something different with a chatas and you did it like an oila? So imshina shelo hiza o sha'asalamala psula. So in either situation, it will be possible. Okay. All right. Let's see. Maybe question 5. Oilus of shiasalamata l'shem chatas. Oh, that's din me'ilu. We didn't get up to me'ilu yet. Okay, let's keep moving. All right. So that's going to be the Mishnah. Oilus oif. So again, when it comes to the oilus of, we only do mitzu. You don't do hazah. And also, the application is above the chut sikra. So the shani b'ma'ilim, the shani b'malika. So in the tiny sefer kulan ein matama be'sabliya. We're going to see in the later next Mishnah, it says that in all these situations, there's no, even though it's puzzle, nonetheless, the fact that you did malika, it will machshir it be'sabliya, which means that there's not going to be any tumas nevela on this animal. That's what it means, because it's not matama besabliya, just like nevelos of tahar, and a nevela of a kosher bird. So if one would swallow it, then there's a din tuma. But it's not. That's only if it's in the nevela. But since you did malika, even though it was puzzle, nonetheless, it's not going to be matama tumas nevela. So that's the Mishnah we're going to see pretty soon. So that's what it says over there. So the fact that it says over there that ein matamin bebeis abliya mu'alin behen, but that there is a din mi'ilah if a person benefits from it. Since it's puzzle, and there is actually what's called no shas heter for the kohanim, lo yitzimedi mi'ilah shebehen. So it never left its status of mi'ilah. So once it's now allowed to be eaten because it was a kosher carbon, then it loses its status of mi'ilah because you did the avod and everything. But since it became puzzle and there was never a shas heter, so therefore there is a din mi'ilah. That's what the Mishnah is going to tell us shortly. Now, Seifa Kulan Matam Besabliya Mu'an Behen Nema Telok Rabbi Yeshua. It must be now Rabbi Yeshua. Why? Dik Rabbi Yeshua Haimer Ein Mu'alin. He actually, as we're going to see, it's going to be a machlokas. He's going to say there is no din me'ilah in that case. So therefore, that's not the possible situation. Rather, it must be talking about, again, the nafkamin of squeezing it, or also doing the sprinkling. Same as seifa. Oil sa'of, when it comes to the oil sa'of, which again, the oil sa'of is supposed to be done with just mitzvah and on the top of the chutah sikra. Just lamata, it was done below, which was not supposed to be done. It was supposed to be done up top. And it's kamai sechat, just like a chatas. And you also was a shame chatas. You also had the wrong intentions. It was shlo shma. So he said there's a machlokas whether or not there's a din me'ilah, even though again it was an olos oath, but you did everything l'shem chatas, right? So there's a machlokas whether there's din me'ilah on that. So the shani b'mai elaim b'mitzoi. Maybe the difference again was with mitzoi. We said that by the also, if you only did mitzvah, but here you did hazan mitzvah. So Maybe Shua the shana b'malika b'mitzvah b'malika miyamar. He only says this when it comes to the malika about being mabdo or not mabdo, but not by mitzvah. So miyamar so ella b'malika. So reisha v'seiva b'malika mitziyasa b'mitzvah and reisha v'seiva b'malika mitziyasa b'mitzvah. Okay. Says the next Mishnah. Says the Mastis. The cool one. Maybe we'll just see the whole Mishnah. The cool one, in all the cases above, even though it's possible, but the fact that you did malika, ein matamin b'beis abliyas, we said there's no din tumas nevela. However, mu'alin behen, there is a din me'ilah, as we said, because there's no shas heter to the kohanim, so therefore it never left the status of me'ilah. Chutz, the exception is mechata sa'oif, when we're dealing with a chata sa'of, which was supposed to be done, you're supposed to do haza'in mitzvah and below the chata sikra, shiasel amata, which you did that properly, kamasi chatas, and l'shem chatas. So in that situation, the din is you did everything right? But nonetheless, we make an exception there. Says Rashi, diksherahi, because since it's mamash chatas, you did everything properly. It's a carbon chatas. V'yesh loy shas heter l'kohanim, and therefore now a kohen is allowed to eat it, and therefore now a non-kohen kohen could eat it. Mishum in be'ilah fil lazar. If a zar would consume it or whatever, use it, so then there's no longer din me'ilah, because again the only times the din me'ilah is never shas heter. But over here, because it was a chatas of, you did everything properly like a chatas over you're supposed to do. You did the sprinkling below the chutah sikra. You did the chazah and the mitzvah. So the din is that now a kohen could eat it, and therefore there's no longer a din milah. Okay, so it's because everything was done properly as a chatas. Okay, oilos of. Now an oilos of, which is supposed to be sprinkled above, but shiasel mata. But you did the application on the bottom. K'maisi chatas, just like a chatas, l'shem chatas, and l'shlo l'shma. So in this situation, it's pretty clear it's puzzle. Interestingly enough, there's a machlokas over here whether there's a din me'ilah. So you would think, well, there should definitely be a din me'ilah because there's never a shasa kaisher. So Rashi in fact says, according to Rabbi Lezer, there is a din me'ilah. The ha'oilahi, because it tak is an oila. Umi haitziyim milasai. So the fact is, it's still usher, right? There's shas heter kohanim ein law. There's no such thing when we're dealing with an ola of a shas heter because a kohen's never allowed to eat it anyway. Okay, so Rabbi Yeshua Eimer ein moalin. Why not? Says Rashi, dikivan deshina shmo maseh umim koimo l'shem chatas not nasas chatas. So it's interesting. The fact is, not necessarily can you eat it, but nonetheless you basically did everything as though it's like a chatas. It was l'shem chatas, even it was shlo shmo. It's really an ola, and also you did all the actions like a chatas oaf. So therefore, it takes upon itself on some level the status of a chatas, and therefore, because of that, since it was done l'shem chatas, there's no din me'ilah. Okay. So Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Eliezer, who says that there should be a din me'ilah, he says, I'll explain to you logically why this case, where it was an olas ha'of, and you did everything like a chatas, there should still be me'ilah. Because im chatas, if we're dealing with the case before by chatas, she'ein mu'alin ba, there would be no din me'ilah with shema, if it was done properly, with the right machshava, kishishina shema mu'alin ba, and if you deviate from its name, then there's a din me'ilah. Because if it was done properly, then there's no me'ilah anymore because it's kosher. But once you deviated, then there's there's still a din me'ilah on it. So oila shemu'alin ba l'shma. So when it comes to an oila, because when it comes to a chatas, the kohanim could eat it, but an oila he can never eat it. So even l'shma, there's never a shas heter for the kohanim. So kishashina shema, if you deviate and call the chatas eno din shi'emalu, then certainly it should be a din me'ilah. So it doesn't make any sense because madach, if we look at a chatas in which it was done properly, there's no din me'ilah, but nonetheless there's the din me'ilah if it wasn't done properly. So because the me'ilah doesn't get removed from the chatas if you do it l'shem oila. So if you have a ola in which even if it was done properly, there's no shas heter because you're not kohanim can't eat it because it's a carbon oil, it's coal oil, it's completely burnt. So then certainly when it comes to someone who takes an oil l'shem chatas, that is possible, and there should still be a din of me'ilah on it. So Rabbi Yeshua lo. Rabbi Yeshua, who disagreed and said there's no din me'ilah, again, in the case of an olas ha'of, where you did everything acting like it was a chatas, he says it's kind of like a chatas, and therefore because of that, there's no din me'ilah. Because im amarta b'chatas, if you're dealing with the chatas, shishina shema, that you changed its intention, was shem oil. So now it takes upon itself the status of a carbon in which there is no shas heter for an ola. Shekain shina shema l'davar sheishmo me'ilah, in which there is, if you l'shem oila shechin shina shema l'davar sheishmo me'ilah. So timer b'oila sheshina shema. If you change an oila to a l'shem chatas, shechin shina shema l'davar ein bo me'ilah. So you're changing it to something where there is no me'ilah. In other words, it's not true. By a case of an ola, it's something in which there's always a din me'ilah on it. So if you have a machshava of a chatas, so then your machshava is now changing to something in which there is no me'ilah, right? If you have a chatas, you did everything properly, shem chatas and everything, so then the din is that it's kosher, and therefore there's no din me'ilah. By an oil, no matter what, there's always going to be a din me'ilah. So if it's an oil and you say l'shem chatas, so then at least should take upon itself the status that there should no longer be a din me'ilah. That's the svara of Rabbi Yeshua. Okay, so the Mishnah continues going back and forth over here as we continue Samach Zayin and Aleph. So Amalo Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Eliezer again, who said regarding an olas oaf, and you did everything like a chatas, So he said there's still din me'ila because it wasn't done properly. So there's nothing that should have removed the me'ila. So he says v'hari kachi kadashim sheshachtim b'darim. Let's say you have kachi kadashim, in which of course was supposed to be shechted in the north, but instead it was shechted in the south. The shachtin l'shem kachim kalim. It was shechted for the sake of kadashim kalim yechichu. How do we see this? Shechein shina shemam. You change its name, right, from kachi kadashim to kadashim kalim. Now kadashim kalim could be shechted in the south. Whatever she'ein bo me'ila, so you had something which there is no me'ila on it, because kachim kalim there is no me'ila, as Rashi says, kachim kalim ein behen me'ila ela be'imurin. That's only on the sacrificial parts, but the actual animal itself, the rest of the carbon, there's no din me'ila on it at all. So we find that if you had something in which was kachi kadashim, but you changed it to a kachim kalim, which is a non-me'ila thing, nonetheless, umu'alim behen. Nonetheless, because we're dealing b'metzias with kachi kadashim, so therefore there's a din me'ila. So afato al tatam, don't be nervous or confused or shocked. Al oila, alva bi shishina shmo whatever shein bo me'ila shimaloba, because we look at the thing itself, just like we look at the kachi kadashim itself, we look at the oil itself, and therefore there should still be a din me'ila. So Rabbi Shmuel, when it comes to kachi kadashim sheshach b'darim sheshach in the south, v'shach l'shem kachim kalam shechein shina shemam whatever sheishmo iser v'heter. This is something in which there is an iser, and then there is eventually a heter that you could eventually eat this meat by kachi kadashim. By timer b'oila sheshina shemam whatever shekul heter. When we're talking about an oila which is changed to a chatas, it's kule heter. Okay. So that's again the back and forth what the din is. So we'll get this down a little bit more tomorrow, understanding this machlokas. Okay, let's look at. So we saw question 7, or we didn't see question 7. Let's see it now. Where does Yoshua say that we find an oila liyos chatos? Le'inin ma omer b'gemara d'loi omer d'meshachta. Okay. Oh, 1 second. There's no way we did this. I'm not sure why I turned the page. Question 6. Ma hamikra boy omer Rabbi Yeshua d'oila nefeches liyos chatos. So Rabbi Yeshua said there is a situation that there will not be a din me'ila, and we're talking about it's an oil and was changed into a chatos. So I think it's just explaining the Mishnah portion. If an oil says sheyasel matik masa chatos l'shem chatos, right? So that's clean in our Mishnah. It says oil sa'oif sheyasel matik masa chatos l'shem chatos. So in that situation is where there's a machlokas whether there's a din me'ila or not. Question TA 16. Oil sa'ov shiasalamata. Now, oil sa'ov is supposed to be done above, and he does it below. L'shem chatas, so he does everything for a chatas. Hayim yeshba mi'ila. This is really machlokas. What was the answer? TA 16. La'achers im shina b'malika havi plota de tanoi. So that's what we said over here. If you're Mishana b'malika, which we said is referring to above, right? We said that the cutting of the animal, the im shina b'mitzui, shishin shehiz lamata l'kolyam yishba me'ila. So this case in our Mishnah is where there's a machlokas is Rishina b'malika, okay? Which means that the whole question is, did you do the maisa chatos, which is referring to the cutting being mavdil or not, right? So that's the question over there, right? Shoot. So this is question TA 16. So in this case, here your shina, there's a shina in the malika, right? Which means whether you were, I'll just write mavdil by the oilus oaf. So also, if you are supposed to be mabdil, but over here you did as a chatos, right? You did kamaisa chatos. So masa chatos in that case is referring to, as the Gemara says, shina b'malika. Okay, and that is a machlokas. However, if you're shina b'mitzoi, shehiza lamata, that you did the sprinkling below, even though you're supposed to sprinkle above, everyone holds there's a din me'ila on that. So if you look again, it says, we said if you're shayna when it comes to the ois of ella b'mitzoi, right? This is what it says, ella b'mitzoi. So what does that mean? That you did it below the chut. Okay, so that's what we're talking about, because it says there's no tumas of base abliya. So if neighbor could be Yeshua, there could be Yeshua in Mu'alin. So he says there is no din me'ila, but there's only machlokas dafka when it comes to whether you're mavdo or not. However, if one does the blood applications in the wrong place, so then certainly with direi hakoil there would be a din me'ila. Okay, so that's very complicated, but I think we got it. Let's look at question TB19. Chatas oiv shasal mate kamasa oil psula. Eza masishino. Oh, this is actually not so bad. So this is TB19. So there's two things. Right? Chatas oiv be'emes sarchlas oiv says memata l'chota sikra. Right? The chatas has to be below. Abashinoi b'mitzoi b'zrika o b'havdalah. Shehu loy oisa et zeh b'chatas rak ba'oilas oif. You're only supposed to do the havdalah ba'oilas oif. The carbon chatas oif sarch mitzoi b'zrika mitzoi b'zrika v'hu lo oisa shnehem karoi. Okay, it's a pretty good answer. Adkan.